Good morning, everyone, and happy Thursday. I'm Karina Hill, and on behalf of the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, we want to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Clinical Documentation from Intake to Discharge with Julie Radlauer-Doerfler. This webinar is being made available through a collaboration of the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health and the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. Please note that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode, and you will only be able to view your name. If you have questions, please send them to the presenter and myself by using the chat panel. The button to open the panel is usually located on the upper right side of your monitor. Again, instead of using the Q&A panel, please use the chat panel to send any questions you may think of, and the presenter will address them as time permits. Our audio is broadcast through the internet to your computer. If you experience poor computer audio, there are a few options to try on screen right now, and those options are posted in the chat panel. If you continue to experience poor computer audio, try joining the webinar using the I will call in option. You must be connected to the audio of this presentation and be able to view it on screen as well to receive a certificate of attendance. The recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FADA website within 30 business days. However, the presentation materials are available now, and the link was posted in the chat panel earlier this morning. The archived video displays what looks like to be an error message, but you can ignore it, hit play, and enjoy. To access the recording and PowerPoint, go to www.fada.org, Resource Center, Training Library. FADA produces many webinars and workshops through the support of the Florida Department of Children and Families to help participants track credits earned through attendance. We host an online community that provides a personalized digital journal where participants can maintain statements of credit for webinars and workshops taken through the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. At the end of today's webinar, the web browser will direct everyone to an evaluation form on the FADA website. You will first need to register or sign into your account to complete the evaluation. Information you provide FADA as part of registering remains confidential. Statements of credit will be posted within 30 business days after the evaluation closes in individual professional development journals for persons completing the evaluation and attending the full webinar. Completing the evaluation is necessary to receive CE credit or to access your statement of credit. Do note that the evaluation will close at midnight on Wednesday, February the 10th. 1 to 2 continuing education credits are available for participating in today's webinar for persons licensed through the Board of Nursing, the Board of Clinical Social Work, Marriage and Family Therapy, and Mental Health Counseling, and for persons credentialed through the Florida Certification Board. If you are a licensed healthcare practitioner, be sure to include your Florida license number for reporting to CE Broker when you register with our site for the first time. Please note that WebEx does monitor your arrival and departure, and it provides a report upon completion of the event. We are not permitted to provide partial credit or contact hours or a certificate of attendance if you do not attend the entire webinar. So it's important that you attend the entire webinar. And with that being said, I would like to introduce our presenter, Julie Radlauer-Doerfler, a principal of the Roanoke-Radler Group, has 25 years of extensive experience in the field of both human services and organizational development. Since the inception of the Roanoke-Radler Group, she has been involved in various projects, including training in the evidence-based practice of wraparound, system planning and integration, strategic planning at the system level, grant writing, assisting organizations through the accreditation process, training, coaching, and providing technical assistance, and teaching leadership. with a concentration on strategic planning, curriculum development, continuous quality improvement initiatives, and conducting large-scale organizational and system assessments. The Radlauer-Doerfler Group has assisted numerous organizations and individuals and systems of care attain their goals. And now I would like to welcome our presenter, Julie. I will turn the presentation over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. I would like to welcome you to clinical documentation from intake to discharge. I'm sure you're all really excited to be in the documentation training. So I'm going to do my absolute very best to make this as entertaining as possible, as well as informative. Normally, I would be in person doing this training, which makes it a little bit more engaging. But nonetheless, I think we can get through the material, and I'm going to try to ask you to interact and engage and participate through the chat as much as possible, not only just to keep you awake, but also because I want to hear your valuable input. And every time I do one of these trainings, I learn from you as much as you guys learn from me. So I appreciate you in advance participating in the chat. So if you're comfortable participating in the chat, get your fingers ready so you can type. Karina did a nice job of introducing me, and I'll just kind of add to that a little bit. The Radlauer-Doerfler Group has been around for 18 years, and we're an organizational development firm. We work with individuals, organizations, and communities. A lot of the work that we do is about making improvements in systems. So the reason that I'm doing this training, this training about documentation, is because 20-something years ago, when I was first starting my career, though I had a master's degree, I really had no experience in how to document. So my very first job, I remember being a little bit confused. Like, wait a second, how am I supposed to do a plan? What is a plan? and how do I do a thorough assessment? And I remember being really frustrated that I had been through 6 years of schooling and I wasn't really prepared for the workforce. And so I began to research and figure out how to do documentation. And as I moved up within my career, I realized that this was a huge gap in our system. And so I put together a curriculum, and I've been training it ever since. I feel that, we go through a lot of schooling, but we don't get trained on this basic skill that we use every single day in our job. And so I have also worked in some quality assurance type roles where I've reviewed documentation. And so I kind of know it from both sides. I know it from being a person that is providing services and trying to document, as well as somebody who's a funder and who's reviewing documentation to see if it meets criteria, as well as, in my work with Radlauer, we work with many organizations to help them get accredited. So I look at it from that perspective as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about for the next couple of hours is, how we can improve the documentation that we do. Also, just in full disclosure, that I'm in the process of getting my DRPH, which is a doctor in public health. And so I've, everything that's happening in our world right now, I'll just say that I was studying it before the pandemic, and so my school world has collided with reality. But so that's been a really interesting, change in path for me on my career, because I've learned so much about public health. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Our purpose together for the next couple of hours is I'm going to provide you guys with a foundation for understanding the importance of quality documentation. I know that for most people, documentation tends to be like the thing that you have to do at the end of the day, because it's just, you have to, it's part of your job, but you don't recognize the value in it. And so we're going to spend some time talking about the value in it, because for me, I need to know the why behind I need to do things. When I know why something needs to be done, it makes it a little bit easier for me to do it, even if it's a non-preferred activity. Also, we're going to talk about ways that you kind of like, I want to make sure you understand the resources that are necessary and why the demand for accurate and thorough documentation, why you need to be doing documentation in an accurate and thorough way. And then we're just going to talk about some minimum basic standards, kind of the how of, how to document, in addition to that is part of a contractual requirements and everything else. But when we understand how to do it, it becomes a little less intimidating. So our objectives are to understand the need for accurate and thorough documentation. We're going to identify some common problems with documentation, like what are the barriers, and we're going to try and turn some of those barriers into facilitators. We're going to figure out and learn about what should be documented, demystify documentation, if you will. We will be identifying the relationship between our assessment and our plans and our notes, because in this process, when you're documenting, when you're working with clients, you have to do an accurate and thorough assessment first, and then the results of that assessment drive your planning process. And then all the work that you do relates back to the plan, and that gets documented through progress notes. So there should be a common thread between those three aspects of documentation. And then once you're doing, once the client has progress, then you can get to the discharge planning piece. And we're also going to talk about critical elements for good documentation. Okay? So we'll start off with a quote. This is an original quote. I know you've never seen it or heard it before because I created it. And I'm kidding. But it's true. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. And you can get all philosophical if you want and say, well, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody saw the tree fall, did the tree actually fall? It's kind of the same thing, but in reality, in our world, in the professional world, if something isn't written down, there's no evidence that it occurred. And so we need to make sure that we are accurately and thoroughly documenting things so we have that proof about what has been done. Okay? So we're going to do a little exercise. I'm going to ask you guys to type into the chat. I'm going to read you a scenario, and I want you to, don't take any notes, right? So put your pens down, no notes. Just from what you hear, when I finish reading, I'd like for you to type something into the chat. So just hang on. So listen to what I'm going to say, and then I'll ask you what to type. So here we go. No pens, no notes. Don't write anything down. Cookie Monster is eating apples. The Grouch is in an anger management program, and Big Bird is having reconstructive surgery on his nose. The whole scene of Sesame Street is changing, and the kids are revolting. The number of viewers of Sesame Street has reduced significantly since these changes were implemented, and because of its decline, the government has decided to cut this funding of its PBS program cold turkey. Parents are outraged. They liked the changes on Sesame Street and have scheduled a major protest on the steps of the Capitol for Father's Day, demanding that the funding be restored. They're asking parents to bring cookies to Sal and wear Big Bird noses to demonstrate support for the cause. For more information, log on to www.savethestreet.com. Okay, so what I'd like for you to type in the chat right now is, tell me what you remember from the story that I just read. I'm going to be waiting to see what you type into the chat. Kids are upset. Okay. It's true. Cookie Monster's eating cookies. Big Bird's having reconstructive surgery. Big Bird is having a decrease in funding, and there's a protest, cutting funding. Cookie Monster's eating apples. And Grouch is in the anger management program. Parents are upset. Right. Okay. Big Bird's having surgery. Sesame Street has implemented changes. SaveTheDay.com. Close. Save the Street. Okay. Yeah, something about Father's Day. I don't know, more funding, maybe support. Right? So thank you guys so much for participating. This will make this 2 hours so much more fun. Oh, okay. Stephanie's got a lot to say. And she remembered Save the Street. Good job. Good job. So the youth of today, I'm calling you guys the youth of today because I'm old. The youth of today, you guys just remember, well, if I just remember the website, I'll be able to figure it all out because I could just go to the website and get all the information. So good for you guys. Good job. So then let me ask you this question. Would you have preferred to have all that information in writing, or would you have preferred to have the information read to you and then kind of having to like guess about what you just read? Right, in writing, right. Exactly. So that's the point about documentation. If you have something in writing, then you can refer back to it, you can review it, you can understand it a little bit better. I mean, I just read it to you. It took me 30 seconds or so to read it. But the problem is that if you were distracted, if there was a noise happening outside, or if you just have a bad memory like me, you're not going to be able to, recant that information. So then think about the people that you're working with, the clients that you're working with. If you have to go into court, or something to that effect, if it's not written down, then, we can't testify. We can't say what happened or didn't happen. And I don't remember what I did yesterday. So if I don't write something down and it's really important about a client's life, that's necessary to be written down, right? So when we talk about the why of documentation, just try to remember this right here, this little experiment that we just did, because if we don't have information written down, then we don't know how to help the people that we're working with. And if something happens and there's court involvement, or they're relying on these notes to make important decisions in the client's life, and it's not written down accurately, that's a problem. The other thing to think about, is when we're working with the clients that we're working with, we have to figure out ways to, hold them accountable for the work that they're doing, as well as hold ourselves accountable for, I said I was going to make this phone call. Oops, I forgot to make the phone call, right? If it's not documented, then we don't do it. And then time frame is really important too when you think about it, because if I just meet with a client and then right after I do my note, that's going to be pretty accurate. But if I meet with a client at 9 o'clock and then I have a 10 o'clock, a 1 o'clock, a 4 o'clock, by the time I sit down to write that note from my first session, I have 5 other people's lives in my head, jumbled in my head, right? So then it's not as accurate as it could be. And we think we can do this really well. In reality, when you realize that you can do a note immediately following, and we're going to talk about ways that you can do that, it becomes so much more efficient, and then you don't have like 10 notes to write at the end of the day, which is annoying, right? Because at the end of the day, you're tired and you don't want to do it. So Danielle said something about concurrent documentation, which is awesome. Right, so you can do collaborative documentation, which is similar to concurrent documentation. So you can sit right with the person at the end of your session. You can just say, let's just take a moment and rehash what we did together, and I'm going to write it down. And you can leave the session with your note being completed, right? And so there's lots of ways that we can kind of use what we call economies of scale to make things a little bit easier. Even technology is a great way to make things a little bit easier. One thing that I do is not now because now I'm virtual, but when I was in person, and if I was, going out to a family visit, as soon as I got into the car, I would dictate my note into my phone. I don't use client information, so I would just say Michael, but I wouldn't give the whole name. And I can just, by the end of our session together, I'll help you put together, I have this formula that helps you figure out what needs to go into the note. And I just think in terms of that formula. So I literally, on my cell phone, will just say, met with the client for the purpose of an individual session in the family home. Client, mother, and brother were present. We discussed school, whatever was happening in the school. Client, is concerned about his grades. Client received tutoring and got a B on his biology test. He was very proud of himself and decided he will attend tutoring next week. Schedule the next session for Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And that could be my whole note, right? So using the formula that we're going to talk about, that could be my whole note. And so we want to get to the point where we're not letting it pile up. That took me, a minute and a half to just say that what I just said to you. That would be my whole note. I would just cut and paste that from my phone. If I do it in text, I cut and paste it into an email or a Word document, send it, cut and paste it into whatever electronic medical records I'm using, and I'm pretty much done. I just need to reread it to make sure that it transcribes properly. And so there are apps you can use for that too, or you could just use your online dictation. If you're going to like dictate a text to somebody, and just put it, as long as you say the client's name, Michael, or whatever the client's name is, at the end of the day, which note it's for, you can get your documentation done as you go on during the day, right? So that concurrent documentation, that collaborative documentation, using dictation, those are all great tools that can help you be more efficient, and also not be so stressed out at the end of the day when you have to begin to start writing your notes. Okay, so let's talk about some of the common problems with documentation. I think most people will say, I don't have enough time. I'm so busy doing everything else. The reason that we don't have enough time, true, yes, we're very busy. Also, documentation is not a priority. For most people, you prefer to talk to people as opposed to sit and write or sit in solitude and write. That's why, that reading the story, the Sesame Street story, when we're in person, I would have one group reading it from person to person and do that telephone game where you pass the story from one person to the next, and that person at the end tells their whole story, but which is usually very different than what was read to the person 20 people away from them. And then the other group has the actual paper, and so they can read the story, and you see really the difference. You see how much more accurate the one is that when you're reading it than when it's being passed from person to person to person. So, having the access to written information makes it so valuable. However, when you're talking to somebody, and I'm just telling you the story and I tell you what happened, for some people, especially extroverts, that's much more enticing than for me to have to sit down and write it, right? And so one of the questions when we do that activity, and one group is talking from person to person and the other person is reading from person to person, the group that is talking from person to person, they're laughing and they're having a little bit more fun than the group that's reading, which is more of a silent activity. So yes, it is more fun to talk to people sometimes. However, when we're talking about something as valuable as the client's lives that we're working with, it's really important to make sure we get it right. Right? It's not about having fun. It's about getting it right. And writing down the documentation is really the way to get it done the right way. So we already kind of talked about this, but another common problem with documentation is we weren't trained how to do it. And so when I'm not trained how to do something, I'm just kind of winging it and hoping that I do it the right way. And so just having some direction about how to do it demystifies it, makes you feel a little bit better about it. We're afraid that what we wrote is not right? Or that there could be some kind of a lawsuit based on what we wrote. Especially you guys that work with child welfare, or work with families that are involved in divorces, or the people that are involved in probation. There's a very good likelihood that your records could be subpoenaed. So you need to make sure you document accurately, because you don't know who's going to see that. Especially, some of you guys English may not be your first language. That's a big challenge, right? Because you're not comfortable necessarily with your English, which I don't blame you. I mean, I took Spanish for, I don't even know how many years, 6 years, and I would not be comfortable writing a note in Spanish, right? So the fact that you guys that are not, English is not your first language, you're attempting to be writing, formal documents this way is such a testament to, your hard work, and it's still a little intimidating, right? And so we just have to be aware of that. Can anybody think of some other reasons that maybe, what are your barriers to documentation? What are the things that make you kind of hesitant about documenting? You just put that into the chat so we can learn from each other a little bit. I'm seeing from a previous note that sometimes the notes are generic. That's sometimes a challenge. Yeah, so forgetting. So if we do things sooner, then we won't forget. Tired at the end of the day, who has time for it? It's tedious, I know. Writing is not, repetitive, exactly. So, yeah, you can't use the same note over and over and over again, right? So we can't just cut and paste and use the same note over and over and over again. Yeah, procrastinating. That's just our personality. Some people have that personality, right? And yeah, then we're tired, and it's been a long day. So, okay, some people are saying that not really understanding what are the requirements for insurance companies or for funders. We're going to talk about that. Sometimes even simple things like not knowing how to refer to a client. Am I supposed to use their name? Am I supposed to call them client? Is there another name I'm supposed to use? I think the biggest barrier that I find with documentation really is that people don't know what to write. It's like if they could just understand what it is that's supposed to go in the note, it becomes so much easier, right? And so I think that we're going to spend some time talking about that, which will give you guys just a little bit of perspective, help you understand exactly what needs to go in the note. Once you know what goes in, what should go in there, it makes it a little bit more palatable to do it the right way. Okay, yeah, so Catherine said something about being, it's a client for both. And sometimes we are verbose, right? Either we write too little or we write too much. Everybody's different, and that becomes a challenge too. That's a common problem too. Thank you guys for participating in the chat. Okay, so we're going to do another little exercise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a scenario. I'm going to read you an assessment and talk about what would go on the plan. And then I'm going to show you a couple of notes. And I want you guys in the chat to tell me, be my supervisor and score me or grade me on these notes, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and read you. We're talking about James. So James is a 10-year-old African-American male. He lives with his mother, Mary, brother, John, and sister, Sandy. James and John have the same father, Dan. Dan and Mary are divorced. However, Dan plays an active role in the children's lives as he visits the children on the weekends and takes them out twice a month for a few hours. Sandy's father is not involved with it, and his whereabouts are unknown. Sandy has a good relationship with Dan. Mary and Sandy have a solid relationship, and Sandy helps with household chores and gets the younger kids ready for school. James and Mary have conflict over poor school grades, not cleaning his room, helping with household chores, following rules in the community and the school, and fighting with his friends. Mary and John have conflict over chores and house rules. Mary is financially self-sufficient with the assistance from the Housing Authority as Section 8 pays a portion of the rent on their 3-bedroom apartment. Mary gets a disability check, which pays for utilities and other basic necessities. Dan buys clothes and food when he can. His work is not steady, and he does odd jobs in the community to make money. James began showing signs of defiance, poor academic performance, and fighting with friends several months after his parents got divorced. Mary feels that James needs help with his behavior both in school and at home. If he continues to act out in the community, they're at risk of losing their housing benefits and will become homeless. Short-term goals for James' therapy include improved academic performance, control his defiant behavior, and improve his social skills. Some of the risks that brought this family in for services include persistent, serious family stress that significantly impacts their family functioning, and low income, and the single-family household, single-parent household. James wants to get along better with Mary, improve his grades, and spend time with his father without his brothers and sisters. James wants to be a teacher when he grows up, and he wants to help students who have a hard time in school and the community. Mary identifies her natural supports as her mother, Anne, grandmother, June, brother, Mark, and ex-husband, Dan. June and James are close, and she can comfort and console him when nobody else can. Anne, the grandmother, transports James and the siblings to children's church on Sundays, and she invites the family to her home after church for dinner. Uncle Mark has 3 sons, David, Anthony, and Stephen, and they fish and play basketball with James. James is attending regular classes in school and failing math and science. He has a C in reading and a D in history. James does not feel that he's getting enough support from his math and science teacher, and he finds the homework on these subjects really difficult, so he doesn't do it. Mary wants the school to initiate a psychological evaluation to assess where James should be placed academically. James is having problems getting along with the neighborhood children because they tease him about his parents being divorced. James defends himself by hitting the children and calling them names. He gets along well with his cousins, David, Anthony, and Stephen, and enjoys hanging out with them. When he's with them, he doesn't fight because they make him feel good about himself and encourage him to play basketball. Mary and the children are affiliated with Bethel Church in Broward, where Mary and the children were baptized. Uncle Mark was married, and Grandmother Ann ministers the children's church. Mary is close to the pastor. Mary and the children celebrate holidays. They enjoy Christmas and Easter. Mary's role model is her grandmother June, and they pray together every day. Mary does not want psychiatric intervention for James because she wants him to try therapy first. Okay, so that's kind of the scenario. So then on the plan, things that we've decided who we're gonna play with, who's gonna be on the plan, or what activities we're gonna do on the plan. We're gonna focus on James and Mary getting along better. So James is the client, Mary's the mom. So we want mom and client to get along better. So what we're saying is that James and Mary will participate in therapy. Mary is going to use a behavior chart and contracts for household chores, for curfew, and for homework. Okay, so that's the first goal. The second one is James wants to do better in school. He needs help with math and science, and Mary wants him to get a psychological evaluation at school. So Mary's going to meet with the science and the math teacher to help them put together an action plan so that James can bring up his grades. Mary's going to talk to the guidance counselor about the evaluation, and James is going to work with a tutor twice a week. Okay, so that's what we're working on together. So now I'm going to show you a couple of progress notes that were written. And what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to, in the chat, tell me, what do you think about these notes? What's missing? What should be there that's not there? What's there that doesn't need to be there? Just go ahead and give me your feedback, if you will, as though you were my supervisor. Tell me what I need to do to improve these notes a little bit. Oh, you lost the names in there. Oh, that's good feedback. Normally you're reading it. I'm not reading it out loud to you, so I apologize for that. There are a lot of names in there. Okay. My note doesn't sound very clinical. I didn't really list the problem. Still failing in school, but I didn't really list the problem. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like my notes. Okay, not specific enough. There's no quotes from the clients. You could add that in there for sure. Need more about the behaviors. Okay, don't use initials. That's something, right, that maybe I shouldn't do. Where were referrals given? Okay. Sticker chart testing. Okay, where are my interventions? Okay. I can't use initials. There's no date next to the session. I think that's on the top, but there's no ending time. I have a starting time. Oh, no, there's an ending time on this one. So it's a 2-hour note, a 2-hour meeting. Is this a 2-hour note? No. Yeah, this is not a 2-hour note. It's a 2-hour session, but not a 2-hour note. It's a pretty short note for 2 hours, right? All right, well, thank you guys for the feedback. Yeah, so let's talk about this note a little bit. You guys pretty much hit, all of the nails on the head there, right? It's a 2-hour note, but there's definitely not enough information for a 2-hour session. When it comes to initials, the rule of thumb is if your organization has an approved list of acronyms, then you may use initials, and they have to match the approved list of acronyms. So if my organization has a key somewhere that says CL means client, then I can use CL. If there's no key, then I can't, right? Same thing for some people put like an M for mom. If there's no key that says M means mom, then I can't do that. And that's just for consistency across the organization, right? Because different different people have different ideas about what acronyms can be. And so when an auditor comes out to look at notes, they need to be able to look at the key and know that everyone across the organization is using the same acronyms if acronyms are being used, right? So another issue is that met with clients to discuss recent problems in the home. The conversation went well, and we moved on to school issues. What does went well mean, right? So you don't want to be, you want to be very, like, just tell the truth, like what happened, right? It's vague. You want to be able to say, like, mom reported this, client reported this, client and mom appeared to be getting along in the conversation or appeared to be friendly in the conversation, right? You don't want to just say, like, oh, well, what does that mean? Okay, that's just like, it's not grounded in facts. We want to ground everything in observable facts, right? Client is failing in school and mom is worried. That's okay. I mean, it was probably we already were aware of that because that was the goal that we were working on. Client agreed to try harder on a test coming up, and that made the mom happy. Is that relevant? No. I mean, he's been trying, but trying harder, what does that mean? So you would want to say something like, client agreed to tutoring 2 times per week and will study the night before the test. You know, with mom and client will study the night before the test, right? As evidenced by, that's great language, right? Something to that effect. Or client reported, or as evidenced by, right? Younger brother came into the room. What is that? So we spoke with him about doing chores and helping around the house. So if this is individual therapy with James, then the fact that the younger brother came in shouldn't even be part of this note, right? Because it's not relevant. Now, if it was family therapy, then that might be a different story, and we would talk about, because younger brother not doing his chores probably impacts James and certainly impacts mom. So that's a different story. But since this is really individual, then that's not relevant. We'll meet again later this week and see how the family's making progress. So we'll meet Wednesday at 3 o'clock as opposed to we'll meet later this week. And there should be some kind of an assignment, like client will attend tutor 2 times this week. Client will speak with his teacher about doing makeup assignments, whatever is, whatever would be part of that, and then the name is fine, with your credentials, which is always a good way to end it. Okay. So this note is definitely short for 2 hours and definitely needs to be more specific and more geared towards the treatment plan. We did address school, but we didn't talk about what intervention was going to be used. We did address what's happening with chores, but we didn't report about how James was doing. So this note needs to have a little bit more depth in it with, and detail. Okay, so let's move on to my next note. This one's a little bit longer. So I'll take a minute to read this one. And then you can put information into the chat about how I did this time. What do you think? How did I do? Okay, oops, I forgot my end time. This one's definitely a little more in-depth. We didn't talk about every goal. Okay. Got some positive feedback, thank you. No quoted statements, no end time. Better overall picture about what happened in the session, that's true. Some of it's a little too detailed, right? So I can't make you guys happy. Last time not enough detail, this time too much detail. Some irrelevant information. Oh yeah, I still have abbreviations. My next appointment was not scheduled. You guys are sticklers. How was he doing better? I was a little bit, not concrete there, right? Oh, I didn't credential. Shucks. Okay, so you caught me. All right, so let's talk about this one. Yes, I forgot my end time. Session began with mom, sister, brother, and client talking about the fun they had over the weekend. Yeah, kind of irrelevant. Not bad to start off with a little chatty. Not necessary, but not bad, right? They were laughing and telling this writer about a movie they saw and what happened at church on Sunday. That part probably could have been left out, right? Siblings laughed and mom and client discussed plan goals and current status. Tell me more. I want to know what we talked about, right? So both mom and client feel that they are doing better. How? As evidenced by mom reported that client did well in school, something to that effect, right? The family has begun using the chore chart and they're getting rewarded for their hard work. How? So now we know how. Mom fills in the chart every day with the stars when a job is complete. Okay, so mom's using the chore chart, right? So today, this is how. Client has made his bed, picked up his room, helped with dishes, and helped his younger brother with his chores. So as of today, client has 4 stars, and counting is not necessary. He's getting stars because they look good on the poster, and he gets a Twix bar when he does well. So, there's a lot of fluff, I would say. But let me ask you about this Twix bar for a second. Do you feel like it's relevant that we put the Twix bar, the name of the bar, into this chart? Like, is that necessary? So I'm getting some no's. Getting lots and lots of no's and nopes. No, so no. Yeah, so it's not necessary. However, it does show that there's a reward system set up. It does show that he's getting rewarded. Part of it, though, could be if that's what's rewarding to him, we want to document what's rewarding to him. So, if mom tried to give him M&Ms and that didn't motivate him, but Twix bar does, well, yeah, then you would want to add it. But yeah, eventually, though, we want to work with mom to figure out what we can do to transition from an extrinsic motivator to an intrinsic motivator, so that he doesn't only work for pretty stars and a Twix bar, right? So that he does the work because that's what's expected of him. So it's okay to start that way. Look, we're going from no chores to, starting some chores. So it's okay to start that way, but we just have to kind of go slowly with that. And then once we see that it's succeeding, then we kind of start taking away the Twix bar, or come up with something a little bit more intermittent, right? Okay, so then client will continue chart as long as he keeps getting Twix bar and mom follows through with what she's supposed to do. So this tells us something a little bit about how the relationship with mom is, that client knows that, eventually mom's going to stop doing it. So we need to work with mom to be a little more consistent. Again, this is not necessary, right? So you have to figure out what's important to say in a note and what's not important to say in a note. We don't know how long this note was, but you can tell that there's a lot of fluff in here, right? Family's been participating in therapy weekly and feels that it's really helping. That's helpful. That's a good note, sentence to have in the note. Client says that it's nice to have somebody to talk to and wants to have therapy forever. Okay, so that's something we really need to address, is trying to figure out, is there somebody else he could talk to, because therapy is not forever, right? He wants his brother to go to therapy because that's so annoying. That sentence is completely not necessary. He plans on talking to his therapist about bringing his brother into the session for the future. Well, now that's something interesting. Is there a need for ongoing support, right? We're looking to create a sustainable relationship. And so if the client really likes having therapy, well, maybe the client really wants somebody to talk to. And you know what? Maybe brother's somebody that the client can talk to. So if we're looking for, and I see you guys putting in here, the recovery-oriented approach, we're looking for sustainability. This, James and his brother could be support for each other. And so maybe the therapist can help bring that about, so that when therapy is over, the kids will have each other to talk to, right? Talks a little bit about curfew and status and what's happening with that. And then this last sentence is confusing to me. So sessions have been consistent. The therapist will continue treatment for 6 more months based on the need of the family. If you were paying for this service and the client is doing his chores, The family's getting along a little bit better. You know, he's starting to improve a little bit in school. Would that justify 6 more sessions? Right? So we need to, if we're going to ask for continued treatment, we need to be able to justify it. Right? And so there's a balance there because we're trying to be strength-based and talk about the positives, but then also, if we're going to ask for more sessions, we have to talk about why we need more sessions, right? And then the last sentence should always be, when is was there any homework assignment? And then, when's your next session? That should always be how you end, so that you know if we're going to be continuing, this is the next session. So even though this note was longer, you can tell that there's not necessarily more valuable information in it. There's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of irrelevant information and some details that may or may not need to be there, right? So, yeah, I did a little bit better, but I still need a lot of work on this note as well, right? Okay. Good job, you guys. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why we need to document. What's the why behind it, right? Understanding the why helps us do it better. So we need to document mostly because we need accurate and specific evidence for ethical, professional, legal, and financial reasons. If I meet with somebody and I'm helping them make progress in their life, I need to be documenting that for professional reasons. If there's a client who's involved with you because there's court involvement, we need to document for legal reasons. If a third party is paying for my work, I need to document for financial reasons, right? So all of these reasons are necessary, and we know them, but then we don't think about how valuable what we're doing really is. So some of you guys may work on contract basis. People who work on contract basis, all of a sudden documentation becomes a little more valuable because you don't get paid if you didn't document. People who work, as a salaried employee, then there's a little bit more flexibility because you're getting paid regardless of whether you do that part of your job or not. It's important, though, for you to recognize that your entire job includes documenting what you do. You can't just be out there and be the best counselor, the best therapist, the best case manager, the best life coach, but not document the work that you do, because that means you're only doing part of your job. You're not doing your full job, right? So it is part of your job to do it. In fact, when I interview people for positions, as part of the interview process, I have them do documentation. I have them complete a note, because I don't want to hire somebody who's not prepared to document, because that's how much of a part of their job that it is. Another reason we need to document, third-party payers. This is what they look for accountability. I do a lot of auditing, and when I go into an organization and I audit and look at their notes, if they are not documenting what I thought they were doing, or I don't see that the notes are sufficient, then I can't pay them. I can't authorize the notes. And this is really important when you're working for an organization that bills Medicaid, because sometimes Medicaid will do a surprise audit, and they'll come and look at notes and say notes are missing or notes are not sufficient. They can decide that they're going to not approve. Say they look at 10 notes and 2 of the notes don't meet their standards, or 2 of the notes that they were looking for are missing. They can then extrapolate across the whole organization and say, okay, so I'm only going to pay you for 80% of the work that you've done. And in the past, Medicaid has even asked for payback. So they'll say, you owe me 20% of the revenue that you received from Medicaid for the last year, right? And so that's not good. And if you work for organizations and you know how much time it takes, or how much money, that could be for a larger organization, that's a big deal, right? So you really have to make sure that everything's in place. Okay, so there's a question about experience of therapy time versus documentation time. When you get really good at doing your documentation, it shouldn't take you that much time. You should be able to write a note in less than 5 minutes. So for every hour-long therapy session or 45-minute therapy session, you can write a note in 5 minutes. Now, doing an assessment, that takes a long time. But your ongoing progress notes Shouldn't take that long at all. Okay, so the other reason why we need to document is because your assessment, your treatment plan, your progress note, and your discharge plan, they're integrated. So they all affect each other. They're dependent on each other. If I do an accurate, thorough assessment, I get a sense of what's happening with this client, then that assessment drives my planning process. So whatever we identified as needs during the assessment is what ends up on the plan. Then every note that I do talks about the progress that I'm making, or if there's a setback, around those goals that were on the plan. And then I'm ready to discharge when my progress is documented. Right? And so they're all integrated. If we don't document any one of these things, then we can't have this fluid trail of how things are working properly. So let's talk about some kind of cardinal rules, if you will. In the day of electronic medical records, whiteout is kind of irrelevant at this point, I think, but some people might still use it. In a professional formal document, you don't use whiteout. So you would not have whiteout in a chart. If you need to rewrite the note, you rewrite the note. If you make a mistake, you just draw a line through it. You don't scribble so that you can't read the mistake that you wrote. You just draw a simple line through it and then put your initials at the end. When we don't use whiteout, we don't highlight, and you don't put sticky notes in. If say you're looking at a chart and you go, oh my gosh, I forgot to have mom sign this, and I'm just going to put a sticky note here to remind me that mom needs that signature. When I'm an auditor and I come and pull a chart and I look at the chart, I just look for the sticky notes because that tells me where every mistake is. It tells me that there's a signature missing here. It tells me that a note's missing here. It tells me that I need to update this plan here, right? So when you put sticky notes to remind you, if somebody pulls your chart, they know exactly what things are missing in your chart, right? So it's really important not to do things like that. You don't know when an auditor is going to come, and you might not have a chance to look at the chart before the auditor does come. You want to sign, you want to date, you want to credential all of your notes. Oh, okay, somebody said to date the error. Okay, you could do that too. So if you put a line through it and you put your initials, you could also put the date. You want to make sure that you sign, date, and credential all your notes. And credentialing is a little bit confusing for people. They don't know what to write after their name. That's something that you want to talk about with your supervisor and ask them, what's supposed to go after my name? If you have a degree, then you would put, M.S. or something to that effect. If you're licensed mental health counselor, you put L.M.H.C. But then some organizations, I'm an auditor, so sticky notes are helpful. I'm sure they are. I'm an auditor too, and I love when I see the sticky notes. My job is done for me. So you want to find out what your credentials should be and make sure that you use those credentials, okay? Don't ever backdate documents. If you didn't do it right the first time, it is what it is, but don't go back and try to recreate things or backdate documents. It always comes out. Somehow it's apparent that happens. And then paying attention to signatures. You remember, this is a professional document. So your organization would tell you either use blue, use black. For some organizations it's standard. You would never use pink, purple, green, right? You would never sign your name and put a little heart at the top of your name if you're dotting your I. Like that, this is professional, right? And you have to remember that this is a professional document. Okay, so let's talk about strengths-based documentation. We're going to talk about this, take a little, do a little activity together in the chat, and then we're going to take a break. We're striving for strengths-based documentation. The reason that we want strengths-based documentation, or how to make strengths-based documentation, is to focus on the individual, right? We want it to be about this person. If I read a note, or if I read a plan, or if I read an assessment and it seems cookie cutter, it's because they're not focusing on the individual strengths. If I read a note and every note looks exactly the same, or every client's notes look exactly the same, it's because they're not being individualized, which means we're not focusing on the strengths of the person. Having said that, because we work in a deficit-based industry, meaning that you get authorized for services when there's a deficit or a need. We kind of have to strike a balance. You can't just say everything is like unicorns and rainbows. It's all great, and I still need to work with this client, right? There's a reason that we're there. So we have to really try to find strike that balance between, something positive and then our purpose for being here, or what's written on the note, or on the plan, right? When we have the opportunity to document success, you want to do it, right? If they took one small little baby step, okay, so his goal was to get an A in biology. He got a C. But you know what? He had an F before. So he's moving in the right direction. He maybe didn't achieve his goal, but he's moving in the right direction. And so we're looking to create that opportunity to say the positive things, right? And then if we start with the strength-based assessment, the rest of our process will follow. The rest of the work that we do will follow that strength-based perspective. Paige is telling us that strength-based documentation is expected because of recovery-oriented systems of care. Totally agree. Recovery-oriented systems of care is we're going to talk about it later, but it's an overall philosophy that the Department of Children and Families has embraced that basically says we're looking to be individualized, strength-based. We want to focus on the client, that we want to use peer supports whenever possible and create sustainable, natural supports. And so we want to kind of have this orientation to all of the work that we do, and being strength-based is part of that. Okay, so let's just do a little practice in the chat, and then we will take a break. So the reason that we want to be strength-based in our work is because when we approach things from a strength-based perspective, we're sharing that philosophy with the families that we're working with, right? If I walk in there with looking for all the bad things, you know what I'm going to find? All the bad things, right? If I walk in there looking for the positives, I'm going to notice the positives. And so if I notice the positives and I document the positives, that's the orientation that I'm sharing with the family, right? If I'm always looking for the things that are going wrong, then that's what I'm telling, that's the family sees, that I'm always looking for things that are going wrong, right? And so we want to be able to provide some kind of positive input, perspective, energy with the families that we're working with. They have enough negative things going on in their lives, right? They don't need us walking in telling them all the bad things. They need us being there to help support them to do things better, right? And we have to kind of bring that breath of fresh air with us. So in the chat, let's talk about how some of these notes here, or sentences here, could be a little bit more strength-based. So the first one is the individual is still fighting in school. So James is still fighting in school. Are there words in this that I could change, or how could I write that in a more strength-based way? Anybody have any thoughts? Okay, so James continues to engage in physical aggressions in the school setting. Yeah, we could restate it, but just in nicer words. We could definitely do that. We could, okay, so we could say struggling. So he's struggling, he's trying, but he's struggling. Frequency, perfect, right? So he fought 5 times last week, and this time he only fought twice, right? Exactly. Wow. Okay, Catherine and I are right on the same page, from 5 days to 2 days. Yeah, so that's what we want to do. We want to be able, whenever possible, to recognize that we can be pretty negative without it, just like it's almost the way that our mind works sometimes, and we want to bring in positives when we can. So Mom and Juan cannot get along. Well, so maybe, what would you say? But maybe like Mom and Juan are working on their communication skills. It might be something that, okay, including as evidence 5 might be something too, right? Okay, we could define what getting along means. So maybe they're not yelling at each other, but they're, they need to work on things a little bit, right? They're improving their communication skills, right? So be a little bit more specific. Antoine continues to skip school and stay home. What do we think about that one? What's Antoine not doing? If he's skipping school and staying home, he's not going to school, but what else is Antoine not doing? Okay, frequency of skipping school is important. He's staying out of trouble, right? He's not skipping school and, you know, involved in burglary. He's skipping school and he's staying home. So let's try to figure out what it is. He's not getting in trouble in the community. Exactly. So we need to just talk about that in a way. Let's talk about the reasons. Why is Antoine isolating? Let's figure that out. Good. You guys are doing a great job with that. Mary still won't talk in the therapy session, but she's attending. Good job, you guys. Mary's consistently attending therapy sessions. Mary is becoming more comfortable communicating, or Mary's considering communicating. She's building a rapport with the therapist, right? Those are all really good things. This next one I think is awesome. Dennis only got C's on his report card. You could change one word, and that would no longer be deficit-based. Only, exactly. Good job, Samantha. Only. Exactly, right? Dennis got C's on his report card. Okay. I don't even need to know if that's reporting a fact, right? And according to one of my sons, that's perfectly acceptable, right? So we just need to kind of figure out, is that okay? Is mom okay with these? Is Dennis okay with these? Or do we need to improve upon that, right? The family will not follow the rules we discussed in session. Yeah, whose rules are they? That's a really good point, okay? So if the entire family is having a difficult time following the rules, then maybe they were my rules and not their rules. And maybe we need to revisit that and come up with some rules that are more appropriate for this family, or find out what's going on with the family and why they can't follow those rules, right? All Johns wants to do is hang around the video store. What are we thinking about that? Okay, what kind of videos does he like? Okay, so there, we're focusing on the strengths. What does he like to do? And I like that. And okay, so he's interested, but he's not causing problems in the community. Maybe he's interested in videos. Maybe he wants to get a job. Exactly, right? Let's use that interest, that strength, and turn it into something positive. Okay? Shahar will not play with her sisters nicely. Okay, so, but she's playing with her sisters. Okay, and what does nicely mean? So she hits them, right? Be a little bit more concrete and with evidence, as evidenced by her hitting her sister, something to that effect. Dan will not pick up his clothes after basketball practice. He's too tired after basketball practice. He is participating in healthy activities, and mom would prefer if he put his clothes in the hamper, right? So we can recognize the positive instead of being completely negative. How many times a week does he pick up his clothes or not, right? That's all good stuff. Last one. Patrice will not complete her chores properly. She will wash, but she does not want to dry the dishes. She's washing. Yeah, exactly. Patrice likes to wash the dishes. And we need to find somebody else to help her dry. And maybe Patrice will help do some other chore that she likes to do, right? I know, again, in my own personal home, I have one son who loves to vacuum. That's his job because he likes to do it. You know, I'm not going to make him do something that he doesn't like, as long as he's contributing somehow to the household, you know. So we all kind of work together on that. And Marie wants Patrice to come to her house. I would like Patrice to come to my house too. Okay, good job, you guys. Excellent work. So it's time for a break. Let's come back. It's 11:03. So let's come back at 11:10. Used to be a 5-minute break. I gave you a couple extra minutes. We'll come back at 11:10. Okay? Have a nice little break. Get up, stretch, move around. Go outside and look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. Count to 20, look 20 feet away. It will recalibrate your brain from all this close computer activity.
Julie? Julie? Eric? Julie? Hey, what's...
She is muted. See if we can unmute her.
You know what? Oh,
There we go.
Okay, I just
thank you. Okay. I don't know if I could change the font either. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening. I can't unmute myself for some reason.
You're on mute now. You may have to click on the slide to be able to advance it.
It's not letting me change the slides either.
Okay, you can try the space bar to see if that advances it.
Do what?
Try the space bar to see if that might advance it.
No. Mm-mm. Can you just change the slides for me if I say change slides?
Sure. Karina, do you want to take the ball back and then pass it back and see if that fixes it? Karina? Actually, I cannot advance it for you. Karina will have to do that.
Okay.
Karina? Well, I can't right now. I could. Can you?
One moment, everybody. Technical difficulties.
Oh, great. Can you?
Exactly. I can't type in the. I can't do anything except talk. Okay, good. Thank you. I'll just speak, and then when I need to switch to the next slide, I'll just say next slide, and we'll get through the rest of this.
Julie,
yes.
she cannot hear you, so.
Oh no, not combination.
I'm on her cell phone with her. Can you advance the slide now?
No.
No, not her. Okay, well, just let me know when to advance the slides, and we'll make sure we can get through it.
Okay. You're going to talk to her. We'll figure this out.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, deep breath. Let's talk about doing the assessment. Okay. So, when we're doing an assessment, it's really important that we spend time actually getting to know the person, getting to understand their preferences, how they want to receive treatment, and whatever outcomes they're looking to achieve, whatever their expectations are, all of that needs to be part of the process. One of the challenges that we have when we're doing assessments, with our documentation in general, is that it's very prescriptive. Like it's a fill in the blank or it's a drop-down menu and you click on to something. So what we want is to be able to not just answer the question and move on to the next question, but to have more of a conversation, because that's where we're going to find out more about the actual person, about their strengths, their interests, their needs, their talents, their culture. All of that needs to be included. If we're going to truly have this recovery-oriented system of care, all of that needs to be included into the work that we do. When we're being strengths-based, we have to ask questions about strengths. And unfortunately, a lot of times our documentation doesn't give us the opportunity to do that. Right? When we have a narrative assessment, then it's perfect. So we want to make sure that we're asking questions in relationship to the person, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, their social preferences, any spiritual beliefs they have. And we want to ask all these questions in a very open way. Right? We want to be able to make them believe that they are not asking for anything, that they're not telling us anything and we're judging them, that we're just gathering information and getting to know them human to human. and figuring out about their preferences. It's really important. I don't know, you guys, if any of you work with youth, with adolescents, to talk about, to answer questions and ask questions about sexual orientation, about sex in general, right? Because the kids that we're working with, they may not have an adult role model that they can ask those questions to. And so if we're uncomfortable because of our own personal beliefs, talking about that type of work or that type of issue, then we're not being a good resource for our clients. It's more about us than about them. And I don't know about you guys. I have 3 teenage boys. They don't want to talk about sex with me. But believe me, I'm sure it's on their mind. So somebody has to talk to them about it. And oftentimes it ends up being a helping professional. And so we have to get comfortable talking about things that maybe are a little bit uncomfortable, because we are appropriate adults with the clients that we're working with, right? And so if you're working with youth, part of that culture is teenage culture, which is all about being curious, right? And so we have to be comfortable doing that. One thing that often comes up is people say, well, I'm not comfortable talking about spiritual beliefs or religion. I was always told not to talk about, money, politics, and religion with people. Well, but we talk about money with people, right? Because we're talking to them about their finances and if they need financial assistance. So why wouldn't we talk about spirituality, or why wouldn't we talk about religion? Because when we're working with people and we're trying to identify strengths in their lives and we're being strength-based, that includes their access to faith for many people. And so if we don't ask them questions about that, we're not really genuinely getting to know them. And so part of the assessment process needs to be talking about those things that are beyond just the reason that I'm in front of you, right? That's getting to know each other. And it's also recognizing opportunities to connect people with support, which is really important. So we also want to focus on strengths while continuing to recognize those risk factors. And when people talk about the risk factors, we want to be able to listen to that in a non-judgmental way. When a parent talks about their disciplinary style or the fact that they're using substances, right, we want to be able to be non-judgmental about that, ask them questions, get information, make sure it's a safe situation, and figure out what support you can provide for them. Right, so it's not just about the positive, it's also about the negatives, but we want to talk about those risk factors so we know which protective factors to focus on, because that's really important, right? And then whenever we're doing an assessment, we want to talk, of course, to the family. So if we're talking to mom, but there's also a dad or a grandma in the home, we want to talk to them as well, because we need to get all sides of the story. You could ask me lots of questions about my family. You can ask my husband the same questions, and you're going to get told 2 totally different answers, I promise you. Just because mine is right doesn't mean you should also ask him. That was really funny. If we were in person, you would have laughed, and I didn't even get to hear that laughter. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's just talk for a minute about culture, because culture is really, really important to the assessment process as well as the treatment process. When we're talking to people about culture, we want to talk to them about their cultural beliefs. We want to talk to them about the way that they want to receive help, the way that they feel comfortable asking for help. What is their own beliefs? Are they embarrassed that they're asking for help? Are they okay with asking for help? Right? So just think about these questions around culture, and you can put some information into the chat. So when I say culture, what do you think of? What comes to mind? Culture is just huge. So for some people, it's about the language that they speak. For some people, it's about the food that they eat. For some people, it's about their orientation to this world, right? It means so many different things. And so do people from different cultures identify culture differently? Absolutely. Everybody on this webinar is identifying culture differently. You can see from the responses, right? We all have different beliefs and definitions of what culture is. Do you think that people from different cultures share their own personal business differently? 100%, right? Some cultures just let it all hang out. American culture tends to let it all hang out a little bit more than some other cultures, right? Some cultures are very close to the chest. Some cultures don't even tell their family, let alone, somebody who's trying to help them, right? And people from different cultures, they deal with problems. They tackle problems in different ways too, right? So part of our assessment has to be figuring out what the culture of the family is, so that we can then use that culture to help us meet our needs. If we're working with a family that's their family culture tends to be pretty lackadaisical, right? It tends to be pretty relaxed about things. Well, one of the assignments that I give that family is not to put together a chore chart, because that's not how they're going to operate. Just because I think a chore chart might be a solution for James and his family, because they want James to do more chores, doesn't mean that matches their family culture. And so giving them the assignment of doing a chore chart, because that's my solution for somebody who needs to do chores, doesn't mean that that's how they're going to be successful. So we need to find something that's going to speak to their culture. Because what will happen is, sure, while I'm helping them, they'll use this chore chart, but if it's not part of their culture, as soon as I step back, the chart's going to go out the window, and then we're going to have the same issue. So we have to really find a way to address the needs using the culture of the people that we're working with. Okay? And all that happens during the assessment. Next slide, please. Let's talk about planning, right? So we do an accurate, thorough assessment, then we use that information to help us put together our plan. And so our plan, it really needs to include the family, the treatment team, whoever's involved in the life of the child, right? We want to incorporate as many people as possible so that we get a plan that is representative of the needs that need to be addressed. Everything should be based on the assessment. So in the assessment, we identify that this family really needs to have better family communication. That would be something that would go on the plan, right? You wouldn't have an assessment that says the child needs to do better in school and then have no school goals on the plan, right? You see how they kind of like feed into each other, right? On our plan, we want to incorporate strengths, abilities, interests, talent, needs, everything, preferences. All of that would go on the plan. So if mom prefers to have a need met through exercise as opposed to medication, which is, what the scenario that was presented with James' family. Mom doesn't want him to be on medication, She might prefer exercise as a way for him to get his wiggles out if he's presenting with like ADHD or something, right? That's what should go on the plan. So we're using the strength of the family and the preferences of the family to help meet their needs. All plans need to include what services are going to be provided and then time frames. So we don't want to just say he's going to participate in therapy. I want to know weekly therapy for the next 3 months, right? Because that is what will guide our process. If I could say he participates in therapy, well, okay, he did it 1 time this month, but that means he skipped 3 times, so was he still participating? If I don't specify, then yes, he was. And so for documentation purposes, we want to be as specific as possible so we know when we're making progress or when we're not and we need to change something. We want to make sure that our plans are written in language that the family understands, right? And a couple of times when we were talking about the progress notes, people commented about, including quotes. Quotes are a beautiful thing to include during a plan as well as during in your progress notes if you can, even in the assessment too, right? So the reason that we want to make sure that our plans are written in languages that people understand is so that they know what they're working on. Because I could talk about decreasing targeted behavior until we achieve the optimal solution. What did I just say? Like, nobody even knows, But if we said, I'm going to stop using drugs, there you go. Now I know, right? Or I'm going to use drugs, I was using it 5 times a week. I'm going to use it 3 times a week. Now, some parents would say, so you just gave my child permission to use drugs. And we call that harm reduction in the industry, right? So we're going to decrease the number of times and eventually we'll get it down to 0 in a perfect world. But so we have to use language that people understand. We sound more important when we use, big words, but then people don't understand what we're saying. It's much more important to be relatable, right, than it is to be impressive. We want to make sure that the plan gets reviewed on a regular basis and that we're continuing to work on the things that need to be worked on. That's the whole point of this, right? Is let's work on this stuff that we are intending to work on. And then when we're finished, and we find that a family's not working on a goal, well, then let's go back to the drawing board and figure out, let's do a new goal. Okay, that the family said that they wanted to decrease their fighting, but really, that's kind of how they function, and actually they don't want to decrease their fighting. What they want to do is they want to not put holes in the wall when they fight. So they don't want to stop fighting, they just want to stop being physical when they fight. So let's refine that goal and make it a little bit more realistic, right, or relevant to the client's interests, talent, their culture, and what they want, their expectations. And then always, the family gets a copy of the plan. A signed copy goes into the chart, and the family should get a copy of it because they're the ones that are doing the work. They should have the way you guys wanted to have the written documentation of the Sesame Street story. The family should have the written documentation of what they're supposed to be working on. It's just a constant reminder of this is what we said we were going to work on together. Okay, next slide, please. When we're writing goals, it's important to use SMART goals, and this is pretty standard across the board, right? So we want our goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time framed, right? So specific meaning I know exactly what it is that I'm working on. Measurable, it doesn't always have to have numbers. You could say that I will take my medication daily. Now that's measurable. Did you take it today or didn't you, right? You don't have to say I'm going to take it 50% of the time. That's confusing when you start using, most of the people in our field are social workers. That means we're not necessarily good with math. So putting percentages, into our goals is confusing for people. Just be as plain and simple and concise and specific as possible. And we want to make sure that the goals that we set are attainable and realistic. This is really important. The majority of the time when families falter on achieving a goal, it's because the goal is too big, right? So he's doing drugs 7 days per week, and we say he's going to stop doing drugs. Well, he's not going to go from 7 to 0, so then he's not going to achieve the goal. He's going to be frustrated, and he'll say, forget it. But if we say, okay, you're doing drugs 7 days per week, let's cut it down to 5 days per week. Can you do that? He says, yes. Okay, then it's attainable. And then when he gets it to 5 days a week, we say, okay, are you ready to cut it down to 3? Yes. Okay, we'll work our way to it, right? But if we, right off the bat, come up with this really big goal, oftentimes the family gets frustrated and they just stop trying. So that's our responsibility as professionals to take baby steps because people will be more successful. And before you know it, they'll be walking. And then finally, the last part of a SMART goal is that they're time frame. So I will know when I'm going to monitor it and assess it to know whether or not it's been achieved or if I have to just tweak the goal and try to redo it, right? We want to make sure that all goals on plans are appropriate for the person based on their age and their abilities and their preferences. We want to make sure that we're not just thinking about what we are doing with the client. Like, for example, when I was talking to you about incorporating faith into their life, if I'm a therapist, I'm not really going to be incorporating faith into my practice, but I might be talking about how they're going to find connections and they're going to start attending church if that's something that they report that they want to incorporate into their lives, right? So it's beyond what I'm doing with them. I'm going to be incorporating, larger goals into their goals. Most of the time, or into their plans, most of the time, people will say something to the effect of, yeah, but the funder only wants to know what they're paying for. That's not always true. Typically, the funder wants to make sure that what they're paying for is what's being provided is what they're paying for, but you can add additional, right? So as long as the therapeutic goals are listed on the plan, you can then also incorporate other goals that will help or improve their mental health, if that's what you're focusing, or other goals that will decrease their substance use. Going to church might decrease the substance use. So that can be part of your plan with the client. Now, is the funder going to pay for the client to go to church? Probably not. right? But they're going to pay for you to help the client build a support system, and church is part of that support system. Or, build a sponsorship, and going to church might be part of the sponsorship agreement, right? And so you want to make sure that you're thinking beyond just the couple of things that you're going to be working on with the client. And then we want to be reviewing these plans on a pretty regular basis. What tends to happen is we write a plan and then we just look back at it like 3 months later or 6 months later. But people's lives change on a pretty regular basis. So we want to be updating and tweaking our plans whenever possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start talking about progress notes. For most people, when I typically do this training, this is the reason why they're here, is they want help and support around progress notes. So let's talk about progress notes a little bit. A progress note would reflect the services that were based on the goals identified in the treatment plan. Right? So if you think about the progress note, that the example of the longer progress note where it started off with a little bit of chit chat about the weekend, was that something that was on the treatment plan? Probably not. So then was it necessary to be in the progress note? Probably not. Was it wrong to be in the progress note? Not necessarily. It's just not necessary, right? And so when you think about this, okay, there's a question in the chat about, before I move on to progress notes. When we update a treatment plan, do we delete goals already met or just close it and add new goals? I usually close them and add new goals. That way you can see all the progress. If you delete them, then they're gone. So I usually close them and add. Thank you for asking that question. We're going to take questions at the end too. So if a question comes up, you can just write it down and then we can talk about it at the end. So we want to make sure that when we're writing our progress notes, that they are related back to the plan, right? Sometimes you can add in, if there's something valuable or important that's not necessarily directly related to the plan, sure, right? But most of the time, we want to keep our notes representative of what it is that we said we were going to cover. Now, here's an example. Say you're working with family and then, say, I don't know, mom gets into a car accident. And mom's in the hospital, and this is really stressful for the child, and you spend time during the session talking about mom's car accident. Well, obviously that wasn't on the plan, right, because it's something that just happened. So does that mean you shouldn't document that you talked about the car accident? No, of course you should, right? So, we have to use our brains about it. And though, if it's a one-time thing, no big deal. We don't have to update the plan. Now, say mom's car accident was a significant car accident and mom's going to have mental or physical health issues for a while, that might be something you add to the plan, right? Is that we're going to support the family through this transition while mom's dealing with her recovery, right? And so you want to make sure that if you're doing ongoing regular work with a family, that it's represented on the plan. And that's why we update plans along the way. It's because when we first started, we couldn't anticipate that mom was going to get into an accident. Mom did get into an accident. It's impacting their family, whether it's through income or now that they are having to caretake for mom and take on more responsibilities. And so now we need to update our plan accordingly. Okay. So a one-time thing, no big deal. If it's going to be an ongoing issue, we need to update. Our progress notes should always reflect the treatment that you talk about progress towards, or if there's a setback, all of that should be included, right? So we want to document the positive or the negative, right? The client was decreasing his substance use behavior. He agreed to try to cut back smoking to 5 times. He actually smoked 10 times last week. Okay, well, that's a setback. We're just going to report it, right? We don't have to talk about how disappointed everybody is in him. We get the gist. We assume that they're disappointed, right? We're just going to report the facts. And then talk about what's our next intervention. How are we going to kind of like recover from that setback, right? Our progress notes are always the evidence that the session occurred. Any third-party funder is going to come and look to see that those progress notes happen. As a supervisor, you're looking to see that those progress notes occurred. Some organizations even go so far as to have the client sign the note that that the person was actually visiting with them. I know now with COVID we're not doing anything like that, but that is something that some organizations do. When you're doing it, when your organization is going through an audit, progress notes, this is what auditors typically look at. And I don't know if anybody, I know that there's, I know Paige does, some monitoring. I do, some monitoring and auditing. If anybody has ever been working for the organization that's being audited and you were the person sitting next to the auditor, there's nothing like that deer in the headlights feeling when, the service was paid for and then you're looking in the chart and the auditor doesn't see the note, right? That's just like this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where that note was. How do we bill for it if we didn't have the note? That's just a really scary feeling. And then you have to start going on a wild goose chase to find the note. For whatever reason, it didn't make it into the chart. That feeling is really kind of scary. So I would strongly encourage you to, make sure that all the notes that go into the chart are the ones that get, billed. And most organizations are really good with having tracking systems for that, the note is what prompts the billing as opposed to the hours reported by the therapist or the case manager, right? And progress notes are used for accountability, both for staff as well as for clients. For clients, they're used for accountability because I forgot what I assigned, James to do. I assigned James to participate in tutoring twice per week and do his homework daily. But, I have 15 other clients, so I forgot that that's what I asked James to do. So when I go out to see him next week, if I don't peek at my note before, I don't remember that he was supposed to go to tutoring, so I might then not ask him about it. So I'm holding him accountable through my note. It's also accountability for a staff person, because as a staff person, first of all, you're accountable for doing your job. But secondly, I might write in there that I'm going to make a referral somewhere. And then I sometimes forget to do things like that because I have so many other clients and so many balls in the air. I could read back on the note and go, oh my gosh, I was supposed to make this referral. Let me make it before I see the family, right? So progress notes are really beneficial for accountability for both clients as well as for staff. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what does a good progress note look like. Okay, a good progress note includes the content of the topics that were discussed in the session, first and foremost, right? It relates back to the plans that are on the goals that are on the plan. It talks about those setbacks, the progress that's made or setbacks that occur. Talks about the current status of the goals, that we're continuing to work on this goal together. If there are risk factors, we can address risk factors. It talks about need for continued service, if that's something that's necessary, like so when's our next session cell. And a good progress note is written with nice grammar, spelling is correct, we can read it, it's legible. That makes a good progress note. One thing to pay attention to about grammar is to write incomplete sentences. You want to make sure that you don't say like met with client. Technically, that is a complete sentence. However, this writer met with the client, therapist met with the client in the family home. Like you want to embellish a little bit than like a 3-word sentence, met with client, right? Next, thank you. A good progress note talks about a time frame, right? So what starts off with the date, the starting and ending time, how long the session was, where the session occurred, right? So met with the client in the family home for the purpose of an individual session. Met with the family in the office for the purpose of a family session, something like that, right? You want to make sure you talk about the type of session. That's really important. And then for each goal that's on the treatment plan, you want to be able to discuss them in a little bit of depth. So you want to have at least one statement for each note that relates back to the service plan. So one statement, one section, if you will. So you want to talk about per topic, you want to have at least 3 sentences. And I'm going to tell you in the next slide how to have those sentences. So next slide, please. So this is our formula for success. If you remember at the beginning of the training, I said by the end, I will kind of give you like this, short version of what needs to be in a plan, or in a note. This is it right here, right? So those of you guys that, printed out the PowerPoint, then you probably want to just like cut out this one little slide and keep it with you, put it in your chart, in your, folder that goes with you everywhere you go. You guys that didn't cut it out, you could just take a picture of the slide if you want to right now. Because this is kind of like the formula for success, the recipe for success. When you're writing a progress note, the first one or two sentences, those are opening sentences. So that's the who, what, where, when, why, right? So who was present, what type of session, and where did it occur? You can do that all in one session. Met with the family, in the family home, for a family session. Met with the client at the park for an individual session. Whatever that looks like. All of that can go in one sentence. It's important because that's the kind of session that you're billing for and who was present, right? Those are important items. Then, for each goal on the plan, you should have some kind of a reference to that, right? And usually it needs, at a minimum, it would be 3 sentences per goal, okay? So for each goal, you're going to talk about what the goal was, what intervention was used, and what progress was made, or what progress was made and what intervention was used. You can move these around, right? So it's James was trying to get a passing grade on his biology test. He received tutoring 2 times per week, and then you would say James received a B on his biology grade and celebrated success with his mom. Right. So there you go. So what was the goal? Do better on his test. What were intervention used? He had therapy, he had tutoring, sorry. And then what was the progress? He, got a B. You could also say James wanted to improve his grades on his biology. James received a B on his biology test last week. He did better because he participated in tutoring 2 times that week, right? Or he met with his counselor before and she taught him whatever he needed to learn, right? So for each goal, you would have those 3 sentences, right? So you're going to talk about what the goal is, talk about did they do better or worse, and then talk about the intervention was used. Okay, and then for the next goal, you would do the same thing. Now, you could have a whole session and spend the whole time talking about school and not talk about anything else. Well, then, okay, you would have at least these 3 sentences, and you'd have some other filler sentences, like what else worked or what else didn't work, or was he okay with the B, or was he disappointed, or was he really, really, really happy about it? What reward did he get? You can add that in there if you want to. You don't have to. As long as you have this information, you're covered, right? And then, so the next one was about doing chores. So the goal was that the entire family would participate in using chores. The family has been using the chore chart, and James cleaned his room, and that second note, that was he cleaned his room, he helped with the dishes and whatnot. He received 4 stars and a Twix bar, or he's received a reward on the chore chart, and the family reports the chore chart is working for them, whatever that is, right? So that's the progress, and then the intervention that was used. So you don't have to write 10 sentences. You really only need to write what is your opening sentence, 3 sentences per goal, right? So that could be 3 sentences. That could be, if you're talking about 2 goals, that would be 6 sentences. If you address 3 goals, that would be 9 sentences, right? If you're spending 2 hours with the family, you should be addressing more than 1 goal, obviously, right? So then after you've done that section, that kind of like the body piece, then you're going to have 1 sentence about next steps. This could include if there are any risk factors that need to be addressed. This could include if I need to make any referrals. This could include what the family's going to do, what the client's going to do next, right? So, mom agreed that they would put together, if we're talking about family communication, mom agreed that they would put together a list of games that they want to play. Or mom agreed that they would make dinner together on Friday night, whatever that looks like, right? And then your last sentence is kind of that closing sentence, which talks about next steps, next session, if there's any homework. So The family's going to have dinner together 3 times per week, and the next session is scheduled for next Wednesday, February 11th at 4 o'clock, whatever it is. Okay, so that's your entire process. You're opening 1 or 2 sentences, 3 sentences per goal. You have multiple goals, more than 3, right? Your next steps, and then your closing sentence. Next slide, please. Sorry. So here's a sample note. Okay, I have my starting and ending time. The family session began with mom, sister, brother, and James talking in the family home. They shared about the fun they had over the weekend and were laughing and telling this writer about a movie they saw and what happened at church on Sunday. Okay, so there's a little bit of opening kind of chat, if you will, if you want to. You could take out the siblings left, and mom and James discussed plans and the current status. And then both mom and James feel that they're doing better. The families are done using their chore chart, and they're getting rewarded for their hard work. Mom completes the chart, and James has made his bed, so that's the intervention, right? The chore chart's the intervention, and this is the progress. He made his bed, picked up his room, he's doing his dishes. The family's participating in weekly therapy, and they feel like it's helping. James says it's nice to have somebody to talk to and wants to continue therapy. I'm not asking for any more sessions. Sessions have been consistent. The therapist assigned the family their chore charts, and there's their homework, and this is our next session. Great. So even in this sentence, I have to say that, you know, there's a little bit of fluff in here. You could take out some of the details if you wanted to. But basically, this covers everything. Somebody's asking, do I put a mini mental status exam in my notes, just as a mood or an affect? You can, if you're dealing with people that are experiencing mental health or substance use. Some organizations require that you do like a CGAS or like a GAS score every session. It depends on what your program calls for. We're going to move on, and then I'll answer the questions after. So next slide, please. So let's talk about discharge planning. So the client will tell us when they're ready to be discharged. We would know when they're ready to be discharged, but the client will tell us when they're ready to be discharged as well. The discharge plan or the transition plan would be completed with the person, right? Now, transition plan is different than a discharge plan. So a transition plan is something that you would give to the client or do with the client, and that would include like when you're no longer working with them, who can they call when they need help, right? What are the goals that they're going to continue to work on themselves? You want to make sure that you leave them with some kind of tangible documentation, if you will, so that they know who to call if they need help in the future. And then beyond that, for your organization, you need to do what's called a discharge plan, which is really the formal closing paperwork that goes into the client file, right? And this is for your internal organization work. The family would not see a discharge plan. So a transition plan you will work on with the client. A discharge plan is a formal documentation as part of closing the client, officially closing the client out, right? In your discharge plan, in both your transition plan and your discharge plan, you would want to include the accomplishments that the client achieved, as well as if there's any future needs, you would include that into both plans as well. If you're making a referral for them for another program, if they're going to be continuing on with just the psychiatrist, whatever that looks like, right? And then we want to make sure that whatever ongoing support they're going to have, you list phone numbers or make it easy for the family to get access to that information if they need to. Next slide. We want to document efficiently and effectively. And we talked about all of these things. I'm just kind of like doing a little bit of a recap. So we're going to chart promptly. We want to document as quickly after the session as possible. Do not wait even 24 hours, because if you see 5 other people, you're confused. You don't know who did what, who you did what with, right? So right after, during the session is ideal, collaborative documentation. Right after the session, you can dictate and then take that information to build your note. or worst case scenario at the end of the day. The longer you wait, the less accurate your note will be. Make sure you fill out all forms accurately, completely. Start every form with the starting and ending time, the day, the year, the month, right, AM, PM. Try to sit down and organize your thoughts before you write your note. That little formula that I gave you, if you get into the habit of just sitting down and organizing your thoughts, okay, we talked about school. What happened? Okay, he wants to do better in school. He studied with a tutor for his test, and he got a B. Okay, let me write that. You know what I mean? If you organize your thoughts, you can use that formula. Usually, I ask people to kind of take the documentation challenge. So for the next 21 days, use that little, that formula and see if it simplifies your documentation. What you'll find is it will become second nature. And then you'll just be thinking in that 3-sentence structure. So you start with your opening sentence. The opening sentence is easy. The closing sentence is easy. It's the middle body piece where it's just those 3 sentences. So what was the goal? What was the intervention? What was the progress? Or what was the goal? What was the progress? What was the intervention? Those 2 are interchangeable for each goal, right? And just get into that flow. And every time you sit down to write a note, it'll just come out that way, right? Make sure you report observable facts. Make sure you write legibly if you're writing. Use complete sentences. We talked about that. If you're in the middle of charting and then you get interrupted, then just clear your head before you finish, doing your notes, and then only use approved abbreviations. Next slide, please. So let's wrap it up, right? One of the expectations for a recovery-oriented system of care is that everybody has the right to participate in their planning. We can't plan about people without people. It doesn't work. It's not successful, right? They have to be the ones driving the process. We want documentation to be a collaborative process. We want our documentation to be person-centered, individualized, right? All of that's really important to make sure that we get specific documentation to this particular client. And being strength-based with this focus on recovery is really important. People, with everything that's happening in the world today, people need to know that there's a chance that things are going to get better. And that's really what recovery-oriented systems of care relates to. It's like whatever's happening right now is just that. It's your current experience, right? However, things are going to get better, right? If we talk about COVID and say like, okay, we're no longer seeing people in person, we're going to be on the computer, and there's no end in sight, well, that really drains us of all of our hope. But if we say, you know what, right now, it kind of stinks because we're all virtual. But you know what, as soon as we can get this vaccination moving and the herd immunity, this time next year, things should be back to normal. Well, that gives you hope. And so people who are experiencing mental health and substance use conditions, they need that same hope, right? And then this whole process is a fluid process, right? From the assessment to the treatment plan to the progress notes to the discharge plan, they all work together in order for clients to achieve their positive outcomes. Next slide. Just some parting thoughts for you. And I will take some questions. We only have a couple of minutes left. I know there was one question about work in residential mental health facility. The clients are tracked by staff. Do we as clinicians still comment on them? Adult living skills or financial concerns? Do we still comment on each goal in every individual note? Yeah, if you are a therapist and you're working on a particular goal, then yes, you would talk about the goals. Because if you're doing if you're doing a progress thing, you would talk about the progress.
I have a question, Julie.
Sure.
There's someone in the audience that asked, are Medicaid notes the gold standard? And then how much time should a thorough clinical assessment take?
Okay. So Medicaid notes are the gold standard. Medicaid is the person who's reimbursing, or the organization that's reimbursing you. Every funder has different requirements for what needs to be in their notes. I'll tell you that what we just went through, the formula, that's acceptable by Medicaid, and that's acceptable by most private funders as well. If you're working in a specific program, like, for example, say you're doing like family builders, you spend like 4 hours at a time in the home with the family, that's going to be a different kind of note. If you're doing a group session, that's going to be a different kind of a note. So it really depends on what service you're providing and who the funder is. But if you include the information that we just discussed, you're meeting the requirements for documentation.
And then when documenting a group note, can we add the contribution of other members in each chart?
No, you should not. When documenting a group note, you should really keep it to what the client that you're charting for says, because it's about their treatment. Now, if you have somebody in the group that causes, incredible disruption, you can say the group was disrupted because of a conversation about politics. You could say that, but you wouldn't say Michael said, John said in Michael's note. You wouldn't do that. You would keep that for John gets this information about his progress in his note, and Michael gets the information about his progress in his note.
So it looks like we're about out of time, and we do need to go over some technical information regarding evaluation and CEUs. If you want to quickly take down Julie's email here for further questions, she'll be happy to respond to you through her email. So, and Julie, thank you so much. This was very interesting, and we got a lot of comments and feedback, and we appreciate you presenting again.
No problem.
Okay. When we conclude today's webinar, your browser is going to take you to an evaluation on the FADA's new website. If you want to receive CE credits or a statement of credit for this event, please complete the evaluation. You will be prompted to register or sign in to complete the evaluation. You can register as a visitor at no cost. For CEs to be reported to CE broker for Florida licensed healthcare practitioners, you must provide an accurate Florida Department of Health license prefix and number the first time you register. After you register or sign in, you will be directed onward to the evaluation. You may consider using the same email address you used when you registered for the webinar through our WebEx link, and the same email that you use in your FADA profile. This helps us connect your attendance and your profile. You will get a second opportunity to complete the evaluation through a follow-up email after the webinar closes. Remember, the evaluation will close at midnight on Wednesday, February the 10th. The sender for that emailed evaluation will be Messenger at WebEx. We do not email statements of credit. Instead, after we verify your attendance and completion of the evaluation, a statement of credit will be generated as a journal entry within your profile. So it is important that you complete a profile on our FADA site so that you can see your credits and that we can post them there. And the website for the recording of today's presentation will be available within 30 business days. You can go to our website at www.fada.org and navigate to our resource center, and it's in our training library. And there's past events that are posted there too if you're interested in looking at the other webinars we've given. And with that being said, we would like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. And we'd also like to recognize and thank especially the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health for funding today's education. And Julie, again, thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Please hold for our evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to type my email into the chat, but I have no capability to do that. If somebody can type my email into the chat.
I put it up there. It's under your picture.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, if you can look at the slides under her picture is Julie's email address.
Thank you guys for participating. It makes the training so much better when people are chatting, so I appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.